Shalom, Israel. This is Bishop Nathaniel. The Israelites have been scattered across the four corners of the earth, as prophesied in Deuteronomy, the 20th chapter. Here at Israel United in Christ, we need your help to recover the remnant of our people, teach them the gospel. Please help us, support us, and join or donate to the Booster Club today. Shalom.
All right, so what we're going to do today, we're starting with Deuteronomy 28, right? And most of you who are already in Israel United in Christ, or maybe you're in a different camp or have an understanding of the Israelites, this is pretty much the chapter where the fascination started, okay? This is what got you to say, you know what, I'm an Israelite, okay? Even for the Northern Kingdom, you might say, hey, well, this one didn't really grab me, but it still grabbed the Northern Kingdom. And for the Northern Kingdom, it would be what? It would be second Esdras, right? 13.
And I want to point something out. Usually what happens with Northern Kingdom with that is that a lot of Northern Kingdom is under the impression that captivity didn't happen to them. If you want to get technical, and I'm talking about going way back to the Assyrian captivity, they were the first ones of our people. Right? I mean, not counting Egypt, of course, where we were all mixed together. But as far as the history of the captivities happening, it really starts from the Assyrian captivity up, right? And the Assyrian captivity started mainly with the Northern Kingdom, if you understand the history with the split, how that happened. But a lot of times, and going back to modern times, where somebody who's a so-called Hispanic or Native Americans, it's just that they don't like the Bible in general. They actually jive with the history and they know this. But when you're talking about the so-called Hispanic tribes, what happens is a lot of Northern Kingdom is not hip to that. They don't understand that history. They believe they have a history outside of slavery, and what it really is it's the cultural appropriation of the Spaniards' history and their background. And there's a sense of, all my Northern Kingdom brothers know, there's this pride about being whichever from, so if you're Dominican, right? Oh, I'm Dominican, and you're super proud about that. If you're Colombian, and the way they speak their Spanish, they're very bougie about that. Like, Spanish, you know, everybody gets on the Puerto Ricans for the way we speak Spanish.
Your Spanish is terrible.
Right? Thank you.
Hey, listen, this car got some good Spanish, bro.
They do.
When they educate, they got some sweet Spanish, bro.
The point that I'm making is that many Northern Kingdom don't understand that history, right? They just kind of go with, yeah, well, we were Taino, whatever, and they glaze over the fact of what really happened when the conquistadors came. You know, you had Columbus, Ponce de Leon, Hernan Cortez, and there's a whole bunch, there's a multitude of them. And unless you really dove into that, a lot of Northern Kingdom don't understand that. And this is why, because Deuteronomy 28, if anything, there's in some ways documented outside of the scriptures. There's more history in books that coincide with what the Bible says for Northern Kingdom than there is for Southern Kingdom, right? But Southern Kingdom just has more of awareness of that history of slavery. It's a little more evident, and there's a lot of psychological and sociological effects that put our people in that way, where Northern Kingdom a little more has drank the Kool-Aid as far as the illusion of inclusion. And we often think, or at one time I did, that a lot of that stuff doesn't pertain to us. And that's where you come into the problem. Deuteronomy 28 is actually very appropriate for Northern Kingdom as well, is the point that I'm trying to make. But it depends on your audience. And some of y'all need to learn that too as teachers. You gotta meet your audience where they're at, all right? And that's like public speaking 101, right? When you're preparing something, you have to consider who your audience is. And you can't speak from a perspective of, because I understand, you have to act like it's the first time it's ever coming out and go from there and understanding the mindset of the individual or the audience that you're dealing with. But go ahead, bro.
No, that's right. That's absolutely correct. So what we're going to do, we're going to start Deuteronomy 28, right? Most of you know this chapter, but we're gonna go through it because a lot of people don't really totally grasp Deuteronomy 28 and why we believe that this is where we find out the way Israel through this chapter, right? Okay, so let's read. This is the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28. When you read from verses 1 through 14, it talks about what? The blessings, right? If we keep the commandments. A lot of times we leave that out, right? Because we don't go through that part. We go straight to the curses. So starting from 15 down is the curses when we do not keep the commandments. Come on.
The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee.
Right. So now we have a picture here, right? Which we depict as Moses. We know Moses was a black man, so we make him like that. So what's here? His 10 commandments. So I like to interact, all right? I'm not going to spend too much time interacting because there's a lot, right? But let me just say this. Did Moses come down with just 10 commandments? This is the question. The crowd says no. How do you know that?
Because God told him to set the law, the book of law, on the outside the covenant.
Okay, but we actually have, I don't want to do too much precepting, all right, because it's going to take us too long, right? But we're showing you this, the 10 commandments, but he came down with much more than that, right? He came down with all of the laws, all of the statutes, all of the judgments. This is when he was, what? He was up 40 days and 40 nights, okay, up on Mount Sinai. You'll find that in what, 2nd Ezra chapter 7, I believe, right? Okay, that's when you get that information. So I don't want y'all to see this and just think he went up there, came down with 2 tablets. Come on, that don't make sense, right? But the bottom line is, these commandments were given out to the nation of Israel and said, let's do this. And the nation of Israel said, yes, we will. And if you did not do it, curses were going to come. Read on, come on. Yes, sir.
Verse 16. Cursed shalt thou be in the city.
Cursed shalt thou be in the city, right? So now, once we were brought to the shores of America, look what's happening here, okay? The curse is already starting to begin. Is this not a curse? Sales of our people. Look what it's saying here, Negroes for sale, all right? This is when you get Master Charles and Master Johnson in Oklahoma sold for, you know, $35 or whatever it was, right? This is it, to be sold. Look at this stuff. This is actual, this is not something that we put together, all right? We know for most of you know that, but for anybody who's going to see this that's not a part of IUIC or any Israelite camp or whatever, this is actually a what? A flyer, right? For the sales of these people. You got to understand that. This is our people right now being sold. Here's a flyer.
And notice it. So it says there, it says Negroes, right?
Right.
Which is interesting because I want to at some point bring out the Bible dictionary and the definition of Negro,
yes,
as far as that's concerned. But it says consisting of 39 men, 15 boys, 24 women, and 16 girls. Just arrived in the Brigantine Dembia, Francis Barr, Mather from Sierra Leone.
Right. So it's actually telling you where the product is coming from, right? Just like you bought your, whatever your phone, it says made in China. So right here, it's telling you, made in Sierra Leone. You kind of got to laugh about this. Well, me, I chuckle at this thing because I'm like, damn, these people had no feelings. They had no remorse. Okay? Go to the next one. Oh yeah, this is good. A lot of people, this is Wall Street in New York City, okay? Most of you who don't know the history, Wall Street, okay, the slaves were actually the first commodity or the first thing sold on Wall Street. And they had to put up a wall there because as the ships were coming in with the slaves, the stench was so bad. Because you know what was going on in the ships, right? The slaves were what? Defecating, urinating, dying, having children. No cleaning up was going on. So the stench of coming from that ship was so bad that they put up a wall, a literal wall, to try to like, I mean, how can you make that smell go away? But you understand what I'm saying. This is that's how that term started. And then on, you know, as it grew, more commodities were sold, but the slaves were actually the first commodity sold on Wall Street. But I'm gonna read this. The slave market located where Wall Street reached the East River was established in 1711 as a place where enslaved blacks and Native Americans could be hired or purchased. Okay, come on.
It says enslaved blacks and Native Americans.
Right.
So that's the key point in this, understanding that in 1711 that Native Americans were sold right along with these so-called Negroes.
That's right.
Right. It's a history and there's confusion in that because it's a history that's not well documented. You will find some so-called Native Americans that are aware of this and they know this. But again, it just goes to that mindset. Northern Kingdom just has a little bit of a different mindset spiritually when it comes to that stuff. That's why they were so easily went off into idolatry and the history and the scriptures and such. But I have several books. I didn't bring them just because, for the sake of time, and I wanted to just stick with this. I think I went over it briefly. We do a radio show in Phoenix on Saturday mornings, and then it's simulcasted. And I've touched on this subject, and I plan to go more into it. But I say it's the little known because it's not popular. The Native American slave trade was very prosperous. The thing was, really, at the end of it, Native Americans knew the land, so they were escaping a lot. And it wasn't a very good product.
Absolutely.
Because of the rebellious spirit that they had. And whereas somebody coming from Sierra Leone doesn't know the landscape, doesn't know where they're going, these Native Americans would escape and live on the land, in the woods or the marshlands or wherever, and they'd never catch him, straight. I mean, y'all seen Apocalypto? And you saw how he knew the lay of the land, and that's how he was able to one guy was against all those guys and stuff like that. That's similar to how it happened. But there was the Native Americans, along with so-called Hispanics, were in the fields together doing these type of things. They just weren't the type of quality slave that they wanted as far as the spirit that they had, all right? They were very rebellious against, because of the confidence that they had, that they knew the land. They knew they could get away and do something, so.
That's right, that's it. All right, so come on. Yeah, go to the next slide. All right, so we're still dealing with what? Cursed in the city, right? Check this out. Thousands of blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans were held in bondage and sold in the early colonial settlements of New France. This is Quebec, all right? New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and Upper Canada, right? So you got guys like The Rock. Y'all know The Rock, right? Dwayne Johnson. This is where his people are from, okay? In Nova Scotia, all right? And just in case y'all might not have known that, there was a lot of brothers who, and at the time of the emancipation, right? When they were allowing slaves to go back to Liberia and Africa, this was a place also where they could have went back to, Nova Scotia and Upper Canada. So a lot of our people went back up there. That's why you have The Rock and these different type of Southern Kingdom brothers. And there's some Northern Kingdom as well that's up there. All right, let's go to the next one. And cursed shalt thou be in the field. I mean, this speaks for itself. Everybody understands about what? The cotton picking, the tobacco, right? All the jobs that were in the field. Who was doing it? Southern Kingdom, Northern Kingdom was involved. We know this. Go to the next slide. Check this out. Look at this. These are all actual pictures. Look at the slave master. He's with all his slaves. Proudly. Right? Even little children. Okay? Even little children.
I want to read that one up there. It says the cotton plantation and his pickings. All right? So this, people talk about the word picnic and its origins. So he would call them his pickings because they were the ones. They look at him right there. You see him standing out right there. Point him out. Point the plantation owner right there in the front. You see him with the hat on, Indiana Jones, right there. That's it. And he there posing. You see them picking the cotton over there. For some of y'all who born and raised in cities, that visual don't. You know what I'm saying? Just seeing the cotton fields. Parts of Phoenix, they still have a lot of farmland, man. They still growing that cotton. That thing blows my mind. I think of that. It's like, talk about association. You know how you can smell something or hear a song and it makes you think of something? My mind goes to that. I don't think of a Hanes t-shirt. I think of imagery like this now with the enlightenment that I have when I see cotton like that. What's that, cane? Is that sugar cane?
Yeah, it's cane. All right. And now in that picture up there, that's actually Mississippi. The cane here, the cane fields, that would be, I don't know, there's no cane in North America. So this has to be in the Caribbean.
Yes.
All right. So I know my family, I'm from the tribe of Benjamin. So that's heavy. That's like growing up right in your yard. That's that cane right there. So that was a big thing in not only in all of the islands, even in the Dominican Republic, even where Simeon is. All right.
You also had, when it came to the sugar cane, especially with Ephraim, there's a book called The Flame of Resistance, and it talks about the mass, they call it migration, but basically enslavement of Taínos, Arawaks, all of that from Caribs over to Hawaii and parts of the Philippines to pick cane because of their understanding of cane, sugar cane, and how to deal with that because of the type of environment that it's in. The cane needs a lot of water, all right? So you need those Caribbean environments for that stuff to grow. I mean, you know this from being Benji on the islands. And because of the expertise of those type of slaves, that means somebody, I'm not saying all, some are Ammon over there in Hawaii, but there's groups of what they would consider themselves so-called Puerto Ricans that stayed there after emancipation and everything, because they were transported there. And some of our brothers and sisters from the Philippines, some of them are straight Moab Ammon, some of them are actually Ephraim, and there's also Issachar was taken over there in some things. But it's highly likely some of these so-called Filipinos, because you look at them and some of them got a certain look, right? You might confuse them for Northern Kingdom. I'm not saying all, that's for the Lord to decide. Really what's going to decide that is if their spirit bears witness with these scriptures. But understand, the history is more than just we were in captivity. You have to understand the migratory routes, right? These trade routes and how these people got to where they're at. And you'll see, so our brothers and sisters in Hawaii, our brothers and sisters in the Philippines, yes, some of them, there's remnants. There's remnants there, all right? Just like, is it Isaiah 11? Where it talks about all those that are scattered. There's remnants. Yes, you have geography based on the 12 tribes, and we have the presentation for that. Lord will spend a little bit of time on that as far as breaking that down. But you got to open up your mind to that understanding. And when we get a point, we'll go back to the African piece and we'll read the about Ham and the Negroes. You also have to understand that as well, all right? Go ahead.
And like you were saying, Cap, the remnant in Hawaii, one that you guys know would be a Bruno Mars, right? A lot of people didn't even know Bruno Mars is Israel, okay? They get, he's Ephraim. But they got on him, oh, Bruno, why you doing black music? Why you doing this and that? He looking at them like, well, y'all stupid. So, oh, I'm doing black music. He said, I'm black. Boom, he started letting them know, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm black, I'm this, that, and I'm over here. My people were here in the slave trade. He told him, he had to actually speak about that because our people are retarded. But we're going to get there.
You had some Jake getting on him, so he's trying to appropriate the culture.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
He is the culture.
I mean, come on, oh, this is bad. I shouldn't have said that, but you know, it's frustrating with our people sometimes, you know? But come on,
it was women too.
Oh, you know the sisters are.
Yeah. Sorry,
let's not make it about that. All right. And cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Right? Now, this is what this is looking like. This is South America.
It's like the Mayan.
Yeah, this is the Mayan, right? So now, what's happening? They had everything under control, right? But what happens? Once the conquistadors came in, they had to go out and the same things that they owned, they had to bring it to the conquistadors and then do what? Buy it back. This is still happening in today's world, you understand? All over the world. Esau goes, takes over a land, like in Africa, I believe it might be Kenya. They bought up all the tea fields, Lipton, bought it up, repackaged it, sent it as Lipton, and now they're selling it. This is crazy.
Hey, let me bring out a script when you mention that.
Yeah, come on.
Read that out. This is one of my favorites to go through when I'm dealing with the Northern Kingdom history. I like to pair this. I usually will start with Lamentations. After the migration in 2nd Ezra, I'll usually start with Lamentations and then pair that with Deuteronomy. I mean, you do it how you want to do it, but Lamentations to me hits very home for Northern Kingdom when you start to read this. So read 5 and 1, and I think we're going to go, we'll go down to 5.
The book of Lamentations, chapter 5 and verse 1.
We'll go down to 6. Go ahead.
Remember, O Lord, what has come upon us. Consider and behold our reproach.
So just like the officer was saying, we were in charge of all that. All right, there's a book called American Holocaust. I believe it's Stannard who wrote it. And when you read that book, it speaks about how when Europeans came over here, many of their diaries and their journals were in awe of the level of organization that we had as a people. They said that we had streets and canals and centers of market and commerce, things like what you would consider a modern day mall today, and they were taken aback by that because they said it was far beyond anything they had in Europe as far as the advances that we had. So don't let the history portray to you that we were a bunch of savages, all right? But really, when you start to dig deeper in that, right, the mainstream narrative of what you'll get in most universities, most history classes, doesn't go into those type of things. Later, permitting, the scripture even tells you, I like to bring out where it talks about we were the ones that created the aqueducts and the canals. And historically, if you tell somebody that, or you tell someone of academia that the Israelites created these things, they'll say, no, the Romans created the aqueducts. They brought water to the fields. The reservoirs were created by the Greeks, the bathhouses, things like that. We had those things long before. Biblically, you can see that. It's just a lot of these things, you know, you look at something from a perspective of that you feel you're superior to a certain people, and they're going to be angry at that type of history, right? Because if you show that they were cave dwellers, they were the ones that didn't have any civility, and you see our people did, they're going to go ahead and create a narrative and a history that benefits and suits them. I mean, it's evident. There are classes and lectures that you can see on that. But here in dealing with this, and referring to standard, you have to understand that we had everything in control, and they were so impressed. You can see it behind you in this graphic. Look at the way all this is structured. Is that savagery? That's not savagery. And I'm not even getting into the pyramidal shapes that they had there, and the understanding that they had in that, understanding that the Israelites built the pyramids for the Egyptians. So you start to make the connections and connect the dots. It's really not that far-fetched. And I understand those of you that are already persuaded, right? Your spirit bore witness with it, which is why you've taken the steps into repentance to be here. But those of you who might be on the fence or are still new in this, you have to constantly establish your faith in this walk, right? The scripture talks about that the carnal and the spiritual in Galatians 5, I believe it's 14, talks about they're always at war with each other. So even in your process of repentance, you're going to start questioning yourself. You're going to have moments where you're going to say, man, is this really true? You know, science says this. I saw an article on this today. Don't let yourself be deceived, all right? You got to understand that that's a bewitching, all right? That's something that's intoxicating to our people. And if you're the very elect, it's impossible for you to be deceived. But those who aren't, they will let that thing turn them away. So just the whole the pyramid access is another thing to look at. But look at all the structure in the streets and stuff, right? So read that verse again.
Lamentations chapter 5, verse 1. Remember, O Lord, what has come upon us. Consider and behold our reproach.
And the reproach is what? If we know historically, we read in verse 15, because we didn't serve the Lord our God, right? With gladness of heart, we didn't keep his words. The reproach that we did to the Most High God by turning away from him. Because an officer brought it out. When Moses came down, we said, yes, we're down with that. We made an agreement. We made a covenant, even though it was more a reinstating of the covenant. The covenant was made between Abraham and the Most High, and by extension, Isaac and Jacob, which is very critical because everybody will jump on Abraham as the father of many nations. But Romans 9 is the killer for that. There's many other scriptures where it talks about how it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then by extension, his 12 sons. All right? The covenant was made there, and it was re-given after Egypt because we came out of a deep sleep. We came out of a state where we were like the Egyptians. Not unlike us today, waking up in these last days, right? As from when all through the civil rights movement and everything. And if you know the history, Bishop has gone some great classes on the history of the Israelite schools and camps and how that stuff came out. They speak of Abba Bivens and all of that. But the point is it's not unlike today where we think, what, I'm American, I'm this, I'm that, right? Not so much Egyptian. We're not saying Egyptian, even though we understand spiritually, right? There's a lot of the Egyptian culture, the Roman culture here. Not unlike that today, where we're acknowledging our reproach and we're returning back. Right, read?
Verse 2. Our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens.
So this is where the officer was saying, hey, at one time we were in charge of anything. And our inheritance is what? When you read Genesis 49, it's talking about that inheritance that was going to be on this side of the world. All right? Whatever it was that was meant to be our goal. For Judah, the inheritance was what? That they were going to be in the seat. They were going to be the top tribe. And all that was taken away in the various captivities, in the subjugation that we've endured. But specifically with Northern Kingdom, what? The inheritance was the lands that we had on this side of the world. It says those things are turned to strangers. And I love this. He says, our houses to aliens. Because right now, and I'm not even going to say the Trump era, but in the mouthpiece of Edom, all right, and the other nations that are confederate behind them, that's more evident for our people today. And trust me, that's the Lord moving that allowed that. That's why I always go on record and I say, I love Trump. You know why? Because God put him in office. Right? Just like I loved Obama, because God put him in office. You know, God had to put that little bit of deception there, and then he said, okay, now wake up. You see, you got one, and he was there, and he did nothing. And I know we had some confusion. Back then, we were very big on not understanding fully with Ham and what we'll bring out in a moment. So after this, before I hand it back to the officer, I do want to read the thing on Ham in the Bible dictionary. But it turned out years later, right, that Obama's probably Jake. Right? When we're looking about Hawaii, I just spoke about Hawaii. He was born in Hawaii, right? Kenya, parts of, his father's supposedly from Kenya, parts of Africa, the scattered. Understanding that history and just the way his spirit flows and everything, right? Maybe. I can't go on record and say that, but it's likely. We used to say no. I remember dead straight, coming in early, we used to say, oh no, his wife is, he ain't, right? And then the Lord followed that with someone like Trump. And all of a sudden, all these closet racists, all these quiet white supremacists by default, I did another show on the radio show, it's called White Supremacists by Default, started to come to the forefront. And they felt emboldened and empowered, and it's not a new thing. It's not a new thing, all right? So when they talk about the houses to aliens, you really truly must embrace they were the first aliens. That's right. They were the ones that came here. This is what I'm talking about when you look at Northern Kingdom history. It's very well documented. And that is by design. It is my belief that is by design as well, because the Lord knew that we would be silly doves, right? Northern Kingdom was going to be the ones that many of us would shake our head at, right? And say, damn, what's wrong with you? And this is why you have more documented history that you can look at in the various books and forms of history, because they were going to need that little bit of extra oomph and push, because the scriptures alone weren't going to be enough, because they didn't use slavery as their identity. Whereas many of our people, and maybe not the newer generation, that's another topic, because they're trying to minimize that, change the way it's brought up. But I grew up always doing book reports on slavery and different things and stuff like that. Now, not so much. So go ahead, read.
We are orphans and fatherless. Our mothers are as widows.
And that goes into what? Because they came, they took the children, they bashed the babies against the rock. We have pictures and stuff of all of that as far as art depictions, all right? They raped the woman, they took them as their wives. They had the prima nocta, like in Braveheart, where if you've seen that movie, they talk about that, the right of, that the ruler would sleep with your wife before you married her, right? So, and again, that opens up a lot of other doors historically that you have to look at as far as that goes. But go ahead, read.
We have drunken our water for money. Our wood is sold unto us.
And this is the part I really wanted to get to. I say all that to say, this is what you start to see happen here when it says, cursed shall be thy basket and thy store, all right? And even extending into Southern Kingdom, you look at even more recent times with Tulsa, all right, and the Black Wall Street, and it says, cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. For a time you will prosper, but because you've hid yourself from me, I will hide my face from you. You read that. He says, you're going to go without an image, without an ephod for a time, and I'm going away, and I'm not coming back a second before until you acknowledge your offense. Right? And this is what we're doing in those last days. And it says, so cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. All this commerce that our people had was taken away from us by these strangers. Read.
Our necks are under persecution. We labor and have no rest.
Why? Because they were working us from sun up to sundown. Our necks were constantly under persecution. We labor and had no rest. Read.
We have given the hand to the Egyptians and to the Assyrians to be satisfied with bread.
We have given the hand to the Egyptians and to the Assyrians to be satisfied with bread. To be satisfied with bread. It says our wood, if you read on, did we read that part? It says we have drunken our water for money, our wood is sold unto us. We are under persecution. This is we've given our hand to the Egyptians. Why? We used to have this presentation where we had little clips of like Even the Rain and movies like that. These are like historical docudramas, all right, that they put in place. And you see that they had to come and they had to bring a certain amount of grain, an omer of grain, an omer of corn, this, that, and the other. And if they didn't, they literally would get their hands chopped off. When he says they gave the hand to the Egyptian, that is literal, not just figurative. And to the Assyrian, they literally, and I don't know if we have the graphic here, we'll see if it comes up, where it shows them with the collection of hands that they would chop off. And you wouldn't get your ration of food for the day if you didn't bring enough of tilling your own land, your own mines, and bringing it to the enemy. All right? Listen, anybody who tells you that these curses don't apply to you, it's because they have something within themselves that nobody wants to say that they're less. Everybody wants to think that they're the top of the food chain. And if anybody were to acknowledge that, that's not of our people, then they're admitting that they're not supreme, they're not special, right? Because they tell you what? Culture came from the Greeks, the Romans, democracy, art, all that things coming out of the Dark Ages. And we have the Dark Ages presentation, all right? But that's not true. That's not true. We're not a base people. We're not devoid of history. Language came from us. Writing came from us. All right, what was that? Evil started with the Greeks, the scripture tells you. What starts to happen is you have to ask yourself, what are you going to choose to believe? Are you going to believe a book, right, that is spiritually inspired, right? That spiritual men inspired by the Most High, as it tells you what Peter's wrote, or are you going to go with what a man wrote? Because the argument to say that men wrote this, then men wrote that the stars in the universe are this, that the law of physics is this. A man wrote your instruction manual on how to turn on your TV and operate your stove. You going to say that's a lie? The simplicity of those things is that there's more behind those type of responses, that barrier that's there. All right. So that's all I wanted on that. I'll hand it back to you, so you can jump on that.
And this is the scripture that you talked about our people actually building the reservoirs and the conduits and all that. Watch this. Y'all might not know the scripture. Those of you who do, that's good. If you don't, take this down. This is 2 Kings, chapter 20 and verse 20. All right? And it says, and the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and all his might, and how he made a pool. Okay? That pool, that's a reservoir. That's not a regular pool. You just jump in and swim around. This is the actual reservoir being discussed, right? And a conduit, and brought water into the city. Okay? So he had ways of getting the water into the city, right? From the rivers and what have you. And the conduits for what? Obviously for the waste. The water's going out. Okay? And the water's coming in, right? Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? Okay? So all that information is in the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. One of the books we don't have right now. Okay? The Bible started off as what? 204 books? I believe it says that in the book of Ezra. It had about 204 books in the beginning. Now we have 80. All right, but this is what the Lord wants us to have.
I want to bring something out with the definition of conduit, so you understand that we're not making this up. It's the same thing as an aqueduct. It says a pipe, tube, or the like for conveying water or other fluid. A similar natural passage, all right? So a conduit is referring to the aqueducts, and I'm going to read the definition of aqueduct. I wish I was able to connect my laptop, but we had the technical difficulties and I cannot. Aqueducts, here we go. And it says, a conduit or artificial channel for conducting water from a distance, usually by means of gravity, or a canal or passage through which liquid passes. So when they tell you that the Greeks and the Romans came up with aqueducts and reservoirs, and that they were uncivilized, and that's what allowed them to build cities, and then you take what I taught you about American Holocaust and Standard, and they said when they came over here, we already had those things. Right. Now you know where they really got that from. All right? They probably stole those ideas and that understanding from one of our people that was in captivity. And who do you think was building those things? They sure weren't. Right? Just like you see Issachar building all the stuff today, right? That's how because our people have that capacity to do that. You have to understand that we have a set of spiritual gifts. And it's the same wording, and they just change it slightly. I like this here because it says civil engineering. Our people had knowledge of what today is called civil engineering, to build cities and platforms, and the Europeans did not. That's why there's stuff. Why do you think they had things like the Black Plague? Obviously, that was the Lord that brought that, but how was things like that facilitated? Because their water wells were filthy and contaminated. They didn't have running water. They didn't have certain necessities and certain understandings of how to use the medicines of the earth and convert those things. All right? And they stole all that from our people. That was the treasure. They try to tell you it was the richness of the land, and that's one part of it. But it goes way deeper than that.
Yeah, that's heavy stuff. This is amazing. We're here on all right, so we're gonna continue on, right? We're gonna try to move this thing. All right, so we're on verse 18. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body. Let me ask you, what is the fruit of thy body? What's that? Children. So when we read that, man, I want to jump off. Listen, when we read that King David, right, he was going to by the fruit of his body, right? Then we should know that Christ is actually his biological heir, right? I'm just trying to connect that for y'all, all right? So cursed shall be the fruit of thy body, which is the children, and the fruit of thy land, right? Which is what? The produce, the products, right? The increase of thy kind, which are cows and cattle, and the flocks of thy sheep, right? So look, hold on, don't go. Look here. This is the curse, see, of the fruit of thy body. See this child? The way it's drawn here, but this is actually from a book of a, I think it was a, yes, yes.
Destruction of the, destruction.
And it was actually a Franciscan monk who was drawing the pictures of this while he was there. Okay, so this is not like something that somebody just said, oh, let's put something together. No, the guy is sitting there, drawing this as he's seeing it. This is the Northern Kingdom. Taking a child and crashing his head, what? Up against the wall to kill him. Look at the dogs here. The dogs are actually eating this child. Eating this child.
Look at this one, hung on the statue.
Right. You got a sister here hanging, with the child hanging as well. Okay? So this is what was happening to our people. There's a scripture in the book of Psalms, chapter 137. Is that what I want? Yeah, and we're going to dash their little ones up against the stones. Now, they won't sing this psalm in the church because they don't understand it. Why would the Lord say, happy shall he be that dashes thy little ones against the stones? How do you explain that? The only way to explain that is know this history. You got what I want?
Yeah, you're going to bring it up.
Okay. That's the only way. So we want to give that edification just in case somebody may say, you know, the Israelites, you know, these guys are violent. They have a lot of hate. No, this is the Bible. This is what the Lord said. Come on.
Actually, start at 7.
The book of Psalms, chapter 137 and verse 7. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, raise it.
That means destroy it. The word raise, R-A-Z-E, destroy. Come on.
Even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon.
The daughter of Babylon is talking about Esau. Because it made mention, don't forget Edom. Now it's calling the daughter of Babylon. Come on.
Who are to be destroyed. Happy shall ye be that rewarded thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones.
See that? Rewardeth Esau as he did us. So now you see it. This is what was going on. So now that's going to come back during that time. All right? During that time leading up to the kingdom and in it, this is what Esau's going to have to go through. They got to taste that. That's why even when you saw the southern kingdom, those children that were what, picking cotton and tobacco and doing all of that. In New York, there's a the museum of the slave museum, right?
Museum of American History.
Yes. Right. So this museum has 5-year-old children in it. They tell you that their muscles, bone, and everything was ripped off of their body at the age of 3 to 5 years old because they were working so hard in the field. That's not going to be looked over by the Most High. That's not going to be looked over. It's going to be dealt with. That's what we read there in Psalms 137. Let's go to the next verse. Or the next slide. Thank you. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. Okay? We're probably going to have to jump through some of these, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's jump through some. Get me down to something a little more familiar. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Well, and we spoke about that Black
Yeah,
History. Cursing,
yeah.
vexation, rebuke.
Right. And most of you know the story, right?
Look at that one, rape white girl, admit.
Right. So the brother never did rape the white woman, but she said she was raped, and then what? The towns were
That happened
destroyed.
a lot. Everybody speaks about Emmett Till, that was a common thing. That was just one that brought media attention. Just like today, when I said that what's happening today is not uncommon. It's just media now, the way it flows and moves allows you to be more aware of these things today because of social media and the internet and things like that. But you see here, this was just a random thing that they used to incite and justify the destruction of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and what they did there.
Okay, yeah. This
You can touch that briefly, because that's
definitely.
good with the pestilence.
Yeah, definitely. Because when you brought up about the plague,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he have consumed thee from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it. So now, let's take a look. Does anybody know the history? Without me saying anything, does anybody know the history of this, what we're looking at?
Yes, sir.
I want you to know, see what she's wrapped up in, and then somebody talk to me. My brother right here.
It was when they gave blankets of smallpox
Right.
to the Native Americans.
That's right. But what we're looking at here is one of the first forms of biological warfare.
Yep, that's right.
This is what we're looking at. Okay, they engineered this, and there was a letter. I meant to always keep this in my phone. but there was a letter of communication between the general who was here in America and his cohorts, I believe, I don't even know if they were in England, it might have been France, okay, and asking him for permission to do this. And then the general said yes, sent him over the bioengineered blankets, and this is what you get. Our people were what? Smallpox, okay, and dying off. Our people never dealt with any of these things before the so-called white man showed up, before Esau came. These diseases didn't exist, okay? They brought all this with them as a weaponizer. I'm telling you, it's another level. You got something on that, Captain? What's that? Okay.
That's just, so that goes into, you think about every disease, every type of, the biological that they use, as well as the things that our people suffer from today, right? Extreme burning, inflammation. I know a lot of y'all brothers and sisters that are into natural stuff, right? Inflammation is the source of all disease in the body and things like that. We can mitigate that today, and we can certainly help it, but understand that that's one of the curses that we will be under. So the ailments that, you know, blacks and Hispanics have the highest blood pressure, cholesterol, different things going on in our body. Yes, we incite that a little more, right, with some of our habits, but it's also, you have to understand that first and foremost, that came as a curse. Remember, we weren't designed to be that way, all right?
That's right.
Go ahead, you can read that.
Oh,
that's a good one.
Yeah. And thy heaven, now remember, a lot of times when this is being taught in the street, a lot of brothers probably won't bring this out because maybe you won't be able to connect. But I'm glad we got these pictures here, because now we're going to see how the Most High really deals with his words. Check this out. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. Right? So let's take a look at the heaven that the Lord is talking about, right? Thy head shall be brass. What was this used for? When this was put around the slaves' necks, once they would jet off and try to flee, right? This bells are ringing. So you hear ching, 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 ching. Hey, a slave's on the run. They knew right away you couldn't get away. Okay? And this kept, and once your neck is controlled, your whole body is controlled. Okay? So this is what you're looking at. This is what the Lord said. Your heaven that is over thy head shall be brass. So for the people who read this in the Bible and say, what the hell does that mean? What does the Bible mean? Why is it written like this? Because you have to get the understanding of the history. Okay? So now you're being shown the history. Check this out. And the earth that is under thee shall be iron. You see? Why did the Lord have to speak like this? Because what? When you read about Christ, when he spoke to the disciples, he always spoke to them in parables. He never told them straight up, hey, listen, you're going to have an iron around your neck and an iron on your feet. Never went like that. It was always in a parable. So the Lord always speaks to us like this. But once you come in and you start to repent, you're going to start to understand these scriptures. You're going to get it. Okay? Come on. And the Lord, all right, let's go.
Let's do that one. So
yes, we'll
show the slave trade,
right. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. Come on. You see this? Now we know, mostly all of us know about the transatlantic slave trade from us coming west, going, from east going west, right? But look what's happening the other way. Okay? Going, into Europe, you see that? 0.3 million into Europe, and probably more. Okay? But most into the West Indies, 4.5 to the West Indies, 0.5 into the United States.
And, so these are just numbers. You don't know how they really quantified this. You know, and they didn't have like accurate systems to count. So these are, the point I'm making is that these are certainly estimates. And we understand it was many, many more than what these numbers say. Look at Brazil, 5 million.
But that's what I want to touch on. So now, you would think that most of the slaves were being brought to America. But look, America is one of the smallest. 0.5. Europe 0.3. Central America 0.2. Lima, Peru. Is a good did you see that? You know what you're
yeah,
talking about?
yeah,
okay,
but,
okay.
But I'll let you say that. I want to say something else here because of the speaking here. So it says between 1650 and 1860, approximately 10 to 15 million enslaved people were transported from Western Africa to the Americas. Most were shipped to the West Indies, Central America, and South America. Now, you have to understand something here. When it says between 1650, the reason, well, let me ask this as a question. What is the reason that 5 million were here, 4.5 million were in the West. Why did most go to the West Indies or the Caribbean and South America? And this is a historical question. You have to understand this. Why were most there? I'm not looking for the biblical answer, but I want something just understanding historically. Go ahead, brother.
Women?
Nope.
To work the fields over there to get the natural resources of the land.
Why?
Because it was real rich in resources.
But there was a whole bunch of natives there. Or were there?
They had to replenish the slaves that was dying.
Right, there you go. You have to understand something, right? You're talking about 1492. From 1492 up to 1650, Northern Kingdom was in heavy captivity, being brought back to Europe from here, because just like they had these routes here to there, and there was the genocide. We just spoke about smallpox. We just spoke about different things. They weren't good slaves because they could escape and they knew the land. They were good workers. They were hardy. They were able to do that, but they were constantly rebelling. They were constantly rising up, but biblically it was not successful, all right? Because they were just escaping. You have vast rainforests there. These people weren't going to come in and chase them there. And many, hundreds of millions were murdered, decimated. They said that you could find the routes of where the other ships were going because of the dead bodies and sharks and fish that were eating all the slave bodies of the Northern Kingdom brothers that were there. And this also happened to Southern Kingdom. But so the reason they went there en masse was because they almost, if it was not for the Lord, right? The scripture said not for him, there wouldn't be that remnant, right? I'm paraphrasing it. Right? So it's a remnant that's there, that he left there. So this is why most of them went there. The other reason is they were still dealing with Gad in North America. They worked the fields a lot. They just, it's a history that they don't show you. So they didn't need as many. And then what started happening here was they came up with the whole system of property and how they were and how you had rights to the children. So they just, you were born second, third, fourth generation slaves. And so they allowed them to multiply and increase because they treated them like cattle, like it was a livestock. It was a commodity. And if I'm gonna spend at that time $100 was like, who knows? But I mean $100 in the 1600s might have been like damn near like 100,000, right? Who knows? You don't want that slave to die off, right? That's a big investment. So what do? You breed them. And the scripture talks about that in Joel, is it? Right? And it talks about a boy for wine and a harlot and all of that, right? You got something that you wanted to reference with that? Go ahead.
This is Deuteronomy 33 and verse 24. This is going into the prophecy of Israel in the last days. But it says, and of Asher, as we know, that's from Colombia to Uruguay, right? It says, and of Asher, he said, let Asher be blessed with children, and let him be acceptable to his brethren, and let him dip his foot in oil. The reason why Asher had to be blessed with children is because, like Captain brought out, millions of them were decimated in slavery. That's why a lot of them had to be replenished with 5 million slaves.
And more so, it wasn't even just the smallpox and stuff. The blessed with the iron means what? They were in mines. All right, Brazil is known for their iron ore, for their oil. You had to dig into mines. Right, Brazilian is it?
The word Brazil is Hebrew for iron.
That's right.
So they died in the mines. When you read it, how they would live down there for 6 months. They had sleeping quarters and everything. They wouldn't see the light of day. And they would work until they died. Same thing with the divers in the Caribbean, diving for pearls. They would come up, try to come up to rest for air, and pushing them back down. Go get dives. Go get more pearls. Up and down, up and down. I mean, there's so much, man. Like, you know, it could, there's so many books that can be written, and if you wanted to, you could write them in the blood of all our ancestors that they killed in that, and that could be the ink. And they still would be more. All right? I mean, but, so you have to see the dynamics of this thing. It's not just by accident that they said 5 million here and 4.5 there, and only a little bit here and a little bit there. The other reason, biblically, is what? The prophecy in Jeremiah, where it says, he will claim them in the new Passover from the land in the north, right? Dealing with what? That this side of the world, the Americas, would most of our people would be in those last days. Now, real quick, I'll take this as the opportunity to read this in the Bible dictionary. So here, you read that. Let me get that really quick so I can just explain that. And you read here because you see Senegal, Sierra Leone, the whole slave coast, right? Bishop Nathaniel has gone over this very thoroughly with the different places, Liberia, Ghana. Understanding historically based on Luke, all right? Based on understanding in Matthew, how we always kind of flee to Africa when there was troubles. Let me correct that, because then that implies the Middle East, which we know is a modern term. We flee deeper into Africa because Israel and what's called the Middle East is Africa. It's an attached landmass, all right? You see it up there, all right? Those of you who are not familiar with that, look up when the term Middle East started being used, all right? I believe it was late 1800s, early 1900s. And it was done, again, it was crafty counsel to put in your frame of mind that it was a separate land. And you don't realize that it was all the same land. So when our people fled deeper into Africa, right, we wound up getting assimilated into the Hamite tribes that were there. And some of us forgot who we were. Some of us, they always made us remember, because they'll say, well, your people sold your people to the white man and to the Arab man and all of that. That's not true. That's not true. You had Hamitic tribes that were selling Israelites. Okay? Read this.
This is the Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary. The definition of a Ham. Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood.
So you understand that after the flood, everybody came from Ham, Shem, and Japheth. They were the progenitors of repopulating the earth, right? Go ahead.
He became the progenitor of the dark races.
So meaning, he is the forefather. You trace the source to the dark races, all right? He is the progenitor of those. You think dark races, you're going to think in your mind right away, oh, he's talking about African Americans. He's talking about Negroes. Read.
He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes.
Not the Negroes. The Negroes are a different people. This is a scholarly work, the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, where they have done this research, right? This is something that, listen, this has to come. I haven't been in a seminary course. This stuff has to come out. And they probably glaze over it. They find some justification to not make that connection. Just like you'll read in there when it talks about, is it Gentile? And it says usually a non-Jew. Usually meaning that what? Sometimes Gentile is used interchangeably to mean our people who are in a Gentile state of mind. So that's not something that we're pulling out of our behind when we break that down and we speak about that. About us having been strangers and Gentiles. All right? It says usually, yes, it does mean other nations. But if it says usually, that means guess what? Sometimes it doesn't. So to blanket say it doesn't, and their justification to say that, oh no, he's talking to Romans, he's talking to Corinthians. That's not what it's going into. So it says not the Negroes. Not the Negroes. What else? Is there anything else on it?
Not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites.
Talking about all what? So-called African races. So when you start to connect the dots and you say, well, wait a second, if Negroes, what is known colloquially as Negroes today, which you would assume it and say, okay, it's talking about, where were we ever called Negroes except in America? It's talking about the blacks in America, right? And you start to make that connection and you say, well, wait a second, then it couldn't be that we were selling ourselves to the enemy. Something else had to be at play here. And this is where you get the history that's going on here. And we were talking about it this morning in the room, and I was saying, you know, there was a time when we came in where Bishop Nathaniel, he wouldn't have stepped foot in Africa. And, you know, I remember having a conversation with him. I'm not going to say, because the people bug out when I say the Lord spoke to him. He was inspired, right? I'm not saying God, he heard the voice of God. He was inspired to do some more research. And that's when we started coming and saying, hey, you got to connect the dots with the history. If our people fled there, that means there was a remnant of our people there. And if the gospel has to be preached in the whole world, for the whole world's not America. Though we may think that, even us in this room, because right, most of us are born American, raised American, American mentality, right? And there's some things that are innate in us to have that. Even though we talk about what we talk about and we understand what we do, there's something that comes with having been raised that way, right? That's not the center of the world, right? And it's fair to say, because anybody, the center of the world to them is where they're from. It's point of reference, right? So the center of the world for them, right, is Africa. So he said, hey, we got to start going in there because guess what? We came out of that slave coast. There's a remnant of our people there, and we must go there. And guess what? Historically, he's even brought out, there's Northern Kingdom there too. That's right. So you can't go by appearance. You got Ephraim there heavy, right? See, that's why the Spanish is messed up, because we're speaking.
It's beautiful. That I thought you were going to go there earlier, saying, because listen, when the slaves were being brought into all these different areas here and these different tribes, you might think that in your mind you're probably saying, well, Judah is mixing with Asher, but that wasn't going on.
No, the Lord is a mastermind.
Yeah. They would always tell us, when we first came in, they would always say, the Lord is a mastermind. These slaves that were coming from here, these were the tribes. They were coming from their tribe back to their people. That's how the Most High was doing it. That's how he was able to resurrect those remnants. In the same book, you're talking about flame of resistance, okay, about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico got decimated to what, about 30,000?
Yeah, something like that.
From millions to 30,000. So what did the Lord do? He brought over Ephraim. The tribe of Ephraim is in Africa right now. We know that. That's why he's making a joke about it. Because we got a brother in our school from Nigeria. He's always been saying, I'm from the tribe of Judah. We said, you from the tribe of X. You don't know what tribe you from. We used to always joke with him. But now we saw the land and everything where he's from. We said, yo, you Ephraim. You from the tribe of Ephraim. He's like, no, I'm Judah. No, you Ephraim. So Ephraim was being brought back to Ephraim. This is what the Most High already knew before we started researching and finding out, wait a minute, Asher's there. Hey, Ephraim is there. But they have what? They have African names now. Well, African names, and we didn't know what they translated into, like Yoruba.
He brought Benji and Levi back.
Exactly.
Benji and Levi.
Exactly.
Right?
The term Yoruba. Yoruba was what? The term that meant Joseph.
Right.
Okay, which is the northern young Joseph broke down into Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, so all the people who are running around, who are Yoruba Africans? They don't know that they're from the northern kingdom of Israel.
Right.
They would never associate themselves with by being Puerto Rican. You understand? Or Cuban.
Okay, real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
The scripture says that they think to do evil, but the Most High uses things for good, right? So the best way to completely destroy people is to divide and conquer. So we had our records on us when we were in Africa, so they knew which tribe that we pertained to. So they said, okay, let's send them to their own people. That way they can't come together and say, hey, we're the children of Israel. So they thought they were doing it to say, okay, let's keep them separate from each other. But really, it was the Most High repopulating this again.
And I want to say something else to what Officer said. Because, you have brothers that are running around saying they're Judah. You have to take your mind sometimes out of what that currently means culturally. And what I mean by that is that the Spanish culture is not my culture. My culture is the Israelite culture. All you Northern Kingdom brothers, all right? And if you separate from that the language, the customs that we have as so-called Hispanics, that's how you can go ahead and then embrace that it's an Israelite culture behind it. And what I mean by that, it's hard for somebody that was raised as Judah to say I'm Ephraim, because his tendencies are not atypical, right? Or it's not typical, it's not stereotypical of what you would think a Northern Kingdom person is to be and whatnot. I've known many Judah that you wouldn't think that they're Judah. They straight, like culturally, in the modern sense, Hispanic. So you have to start to separate from your mind what it means to be from what it means to be that. In a modern sense, Hispanics, right, Negro, that's a product of what they conditioned us to be. The language, the Spanish language was forced on our people. That's not our language, right? And that's my defense when people say I don't speak my Spanish well. I'm like, that's a slave man's language anyway. Get out of here. I speak English well. That's a slave man's language too, right? So, I mean, you get what I'm saying? Y'all, what's up? Y'all all right? You know what? Right? So you can have somebody who don't have the typical tendencies of a Mexican, a Puerto Rican, Dominican, what have you. And that's why it's hard for somebody who looks like Judah, right? Acts like Judah and everything to say, no, I'm not Ephraim, right? I didn't grow up in a household eating rice and beans, right? Whatever. Again, stereotypes. I ate fried chicken and watermelon, right? They're different stereotypes, right? Those are the stereotypes. So you associate yourself with the stereotypes. We have to stop that shit. I'm not saying, you're going to leave those type of things behind as far as the foods you like and stuff like that. But when you really start to embrace and understand that this is our heritage and all that flavor and all the different things we have, it's an Israelite thing, not really so much a tribal thing. And we all at one time had the same type of tendencies. What separates us is the spiritual gifts that you read about in Genesis 49, so on and so forth, and throughout the history, Issachar and their ability to work, right? I mean, they can, you show them how to cook any type of cuisine, they're gonna go ahead in the kitchen and they're gonna cook it. Most of the restaurants you go to, you're thinking like you eating French or Italian, and your brothers is back there cooking that thing up for you. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, and vice versa. It goes for anything. It goes across our people. So you have to take the stereotypes away as identity, right? And start to identify some of what the scriptures say.
Now they will see the true men of God. We are not black men, we are the Israelites. That's right. Take care of us. Take care of us. And our children too. And our children too. We have repented. We have repented. How about you? How about you? People want to know who's the king.
Oh, nation of Israel, it's time to return to the Father. Oh, nation of Israel, it's time to return to the Father.
Now why they trying to make it so hard to serve God? And why when I say that I'm a Jew it sound odd? For years I've been walking around saying that I'm a black man. I ain't saying that no more, it sounds wrong, man.
This is Bishop Nathaniel of Israel United in Christ. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels. Stay up to date with our latest events, music, and classroom lessons. IUIC plans to continue visiting different countries where this gospel has not been preached before. IUIC needs your help in pushing this truth. So join us. Subscribe to our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and podcasts, and stay up to date with us. For more information, please visit www.israelunite.org.